I know in the first episode, Simone Missick, who plays your beautiful wife, Astoria, she kind of lets us know why the series is called Government Cheese. But I need to know, what is the equivalent of government cheese in the UK?
Oh gosh, very good question. The closest I think we got in the UK was that they delivered this bottled milk. Everyone had bottled milks on their doorstep when I was growing up. But nothing quite like government cheese, because government cheese came about because it was actually food that it was in the Second World War. I think they were giving it to the military, and then they made too much of it, and then it was just sitting there in storage, and then they started giving it to low-income families. And
wait, I didn't know the part it was sitting in storage.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. No, you can get government cheese that's been sat there for a long time still.
All right. Okay.
Still tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't know really, if I'm totally honest. But in terms of government cheese within the show itself, you know, what it's symbolic of for us, even though Simone Missick's character talks about it, it's necessity being the mother of invention, and that being something that certainly communities that are more marginalized, lower income communities, black people, you know, in this instance, we take nothing and make it into something.
Yes.
And that's what the Chambers family, you know, are. They are this aspirational family.
Okay, thank you. So before we dive into the life of Hampton Chambers and the rest of the Chambers, on IMDb, one of your trivia items is that from an interview you did on Fresh Air, you told them that your father was a member of a royal family in Nigeria.
Yes.
Okay. And your last name literally means, quote, a king deserves respect.
Yes.
Okay. But you also joke, don't get me wrong, you know, royal families are a dime a dozen in Nigeria. And it's more like being the king of Sherman Oaks, really.
Yeah.
So my question is, how does it feel to be the king of the San Fernando Valley?
Oh yeah, that's certainly bigger than Sherman Oaks. Yeah, well that is true, and it's something I'm very proud of in terms of my heritage. But I will say that I've lived in the valley, the San Fernando Valley, for 18 years now. We moved there in 2007, and I first lived in, for those of you who know, the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. I was in Studio City, then Sherman Oaks, and then now Tarzana. And I didn't know the history of black people in the valley, and that it was a very robust one. And it wasn't until Paul Hunter, who is one of the creators of the show, and the show is actually based on his youth, his time growing up in the San Fernando Valley in the 60s and 70s. And I'm basically playing a version of his dad in the show. He approached me about 6 years ago with a short film. This started as a short film. And that he wanted to make about his father, who, as you can imagine, having just seen Hampton Chambers, was someone who was both challenging as a father, but also someone he had this sort of, I would say, romanticized glow about, you know, this charismatic guy who was his dad. And so, yeah, that's how this came my way. And because Paul also lives in the valley, this was his youth. He took me around all these places in the valley. He literally took me to where it was actually Rocketdyne is the real rocket core, we call in this, but it's right near my house, and it's a huge piece of land that nothing can be built on because it's still contaminated from when Rocketdyne was there, which is why we called it Rocket Core. So yeah, but these are all things I didn't know about the environment I was literally in. I literally am still in.
It's funny. I know about the Valley. I had a really good friend that lived in Studio City. Then another one lived in Woodland Hills. But it always was the place where if you couldn't afford LA proper, you went to the Valley.
Don't say that.
I'm sorry.
That's literally... literally where I live.
No, you lived in, no, if you said Tarzana, that's a different part. That's a different part.
Yeah, you're right.
Going back to Paul Hunter, I heard you talk about the fact you initially shot, like you said, the short. It was a proof of concept. But I'm curious, I mean, you're a big time actor. You've been to the Oscars. You guys know he's knighted. He's an OBE.
I'm not quite knighted. I mean, you wouldn't be calling me a sir. I am an OBE, but that's about 4 tiers down from being knighted. So I'm on my way.
But still, it's a big deal. And plus, you have the Nigerian king thing. All that to say, I'm curious because, we're here with some fellow actors.
Yeah.
This director, video director, we love him, but he came to you and said, can you shoot this short, a proof of concept? What made you say yes to doing something that wasn't, fully fleshed out, or that wasn't already assigned to a distributor? What makes you say yes to something so new?
Well, the thing to mention is Paul Hunter is one of the seminal music directors in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about your favorite music videos from the 90s to early 2000s, he probably directed them. It's how we have Pharrell Williams having done the main titles, because he did some of Pharrell's seminal videos. Michael Jackson, just incredible at what he does. So that level of talent, deciding that he wanted to turn his hand to narrative storytelling, always gets my attention, because I would argue it's almost harder to tell a great story in short form, a story that moves you. It's also why I recently did a short film called The After, and that was also Miss Anne Harriman's very first foray into storytelling, but he's a world-class photographer. Okay. And when I saw his photographs, I just thought, my goodness, this guy is telling stories with his lens in a different way. So, if you are keyed into story, if you're passionate about story, which I am, I'm always looking for who are those individuals who are finding ways to hold a mirror up to humanity in a compelling way that I would be so lucky to be in the crosshairs of their lens, so to speak. And it was the script itself. Paul very humbly found his way to me, talked to me about this script. I was very moved by how he talked about his father and his upbringing, but the script was undeniable. I mean, as you can see from what you just watched, it's very hard to find a comp for it. Like, what is this like? It sort of has these spiritual elements, these fantastical elements, these surreal elements, but it's grounded in a family, but they're really super quirky. They're all very different, but all belong in the same family. So, they were just so, and he packed that into a short film that was like 20 minutes. And so that's why it became less of a hard sell to spin it into the TV show, so to speak. So, yes, I've been fortunate to do some fairly significant films and TV shows, but I think the way you stay hungry is to keep an eye out for who is that person who's going to... Don't all be giving me scripts at the end of this Q&A now. Who is that person who's going to come along and take you in a direction that, you're not even thinking of. And that's absolutely what Paul Hunter did with me and this show.
Talk to us about... We understand the brilliance of Paul Hunter, but what else do you need? Like, is it mostly intelligent writing? Is it a cast to play with? Like, you also talked about in an interview I heard, the one beautiful thing about Government Cheese is the fact that it's expansive, because you can tell this isn't a small story, just from the simple fact he has wide angles. Yeah. So just talk to us about what else appeals to you to come to a story like this.
Well, you just said it. You need resources. And you mentioned Bass Reeves earlier. Bass Reeves and Government Cheese are the first 2 times in a career that is now 26 years. I've been a professional actor. Those 2 projects are the first time that a project that I've been a part of, especially been part of producing, has been given the requisite amount of budget to realize it. More often than not, any story that centers people of color tends to be minimized in terms of budget and resources. So you're shooting into corners to avoid the wide shot, because if it's a period thing, you're in trouble. Even if it's contemporary, we don't have control of that. We don't have control of that. We've all got to shoot here. You know what? We don't even have money to get the licenses. So it's all got to be in one house or whatever it is. And so unfortunately, what that starts to transmit to the audience, when you are constantly seeing narratives either about people of color or about women, when they are always smaller, you start to subconsciously tell the audience that these are lesser valuable and therefore valued stories. And so that's why there is this inexorable attention that tends to go to white and male, which equals heroic, which equals big, which equals box office, because that's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas when you have a show like this that centers a black family, in the 60s, where we normally see black people in a state of trauma and suffering and civil rights and all of those things, all of those stories are valid. I've been part of telling some of those stories. But this is almost more radical in a sense, because the joy, the relatability, the fantastical component, the stuff that the Coen brothers tend to get to do or Wes Anderson gets to do, but you know, almost never have I seen us being afforded that.
I mean, your son wants to be a pole vaulter.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there are black kids who do want to do that.
Yeah.
But because you haven't seen that, it feels so much more extraordinary. So to your question, that's what you need. That's what we so often don't get. I mean, even when you read in the first few pages of the pilot that the prison gets flooded and everyone's swimming, you read it and go, okay, well, that's getting cut. You know, that's the first thing you think. And when you're with Apple and they go, oh, no, we like that bit. You go, really? You really like that bit? Yes, we are doing that bit. And that's what you need. You really do need that stuff.
And I also love the color. The cinematography is just so beautiful. It's so bright and poppy. I just love that. I want to say that. Now, Hampton Chambers is a bit of a criminal.
To say the least.
Say it. But a criminal with heart. Like, he has good intentions.
Yes.
But what did you want to make sure you got right about playing him?
Well, what I love about him is how flawed he is. And the lovability, I think, comes from the relatability. He is equal parts selfish and selfless. You know, he is equal parts a lover of his family and someone who really is challenging for his family. He is someone who is on a true spiritual quest, but cannot relinquish control. And I think for all of us as people, if we are being totally honest, to a greater or lesser degree, we all share in those attributes. As people, one of the things I love about getting to play human beings is how we are never quite one thing or the other. We're so much of the in-between, and drama is conflict. And with this guy, the conflict is often within him or within situations that he's creating and then trying to fix. And so I just find that incredibly relatable.
And talk to us about shooting that first episode. Was that a pilot first and then Apple signed on, or you got the full 10 episodes, the full season?
We got the full season, but Apple does this thing, which, to be honest, I resisted initially, which is so what they pitched me was that we're going to shoot the first episode, then we're going to go dark for a month and hold everyone while we iterate on what is working, what is not, and then we're going to go back and keep shooting. And that just felt so wasteful to me. I was like, you're going to hold the crew, and this is me with my producer hat on now. You're going to hold the crew for that whole time. Like, let's just work really hard on the pilot, on the scripts, just make sure we know what we're doing. And so where we ended up getting to a compromise was like, okay, well, let's not we're going to have one director for every 2 episodes. Let's shoot the first 2 episodes, because at least then you're not now going down, coming back, that director's coming back, then that director goes, then it's another director coming on for the next 2. So we shot the first 2, then we went down for a month, and I've got to say, I will give it to them, even though I don't know that it's what you would do if you weren't literally the richest company in the world, i.e. Apple. It was helpful because the tone of the of the show is very, very specific. It's very unique, and it's something that, like I say, there weren't many comparisons for. So it did help for us to be able to iterate on it, maybe even reshoot some of the stuff that we put in the first 2 episodes. So that's how it worked. But yeah, we pretty much outside of that shot the 10 episodes back to back.
And was that an actual prison?
It was an
wow.
actual prison. We were out in Chino, and we shot that in an actual prison. We built the portion where the water comes crashing in on me, because that literally, there was a tank, a water tank that was hooked up to pipes that they built that side of the prison. And I have to say, the way I know how much I love this show is the things I was prepared to endure for this show. When a water tank is filled with water, what I hadn't thought of is that the top is warmer than the bottom in terms of the water.
Yes.
So by the 7th take of that water coming down the stairs and hitting you in the face, it was literally not like like I'm just using hyperbole. It was literally freezing by the time we got to the 7th take, and it was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever experienced. But apart from that, we were in an actual prison. So I'm just going back to how painful it was.
I was actually shocked that the drawing for the bit machine made it. I thought it was gonna.
Right.
I thought it was gonna be like it was gone, and you were gonna have to start over.
Right.
You made it.
It's the magic of the screen. It probably wouldn't have made it. Let's be completely honest. Neither would the Bible. The actual Bible, that didn't make it. That was a mess. There's pages flying all over the place. So it's the magic of TV.
And what about the chemistry you have with Simone and your sons? It's really beautiful, this diverse family, and especially something to see now. It's kind of, you touched on it a little bit. It's sort of political that you all are here in this moment, especially now. Can you talk to us about that chemistry on set with your castmates?
Yeah, it was very real, and we had to make sure we got it right, because the show lives and dies by virtue of how well the family gel together. Simone, who was just a transcendent performer anyway, but in what we knew we had to find with the family and the actors who were going to be part of that crew, so to speak, is that you had to have actors who could handle the comedic element, but not in an on-the-nose way, not in a kind of British way. Yeah. But you also needed to have actors who weren't so dramatic that you couldn't feel that twinkle in the eye, because everything about the show sort of has a little twinkle. Like you say, it's bright, it's fantastical. Is that real or imagined? And that's a very specific tone. The other person who I think has that tone in spades is Bokeem Woodbine, who plays Bootsy in it as well. But so we did chemistry reads, in our hunt for Simone, or I should say, in our hunt for Astoria. And Simone, it was just so natural with her. She's just such a great talent. And we ended up, I had this idea, because we're supposed to have been married for many years, and I said, okay, Simone, we're going to go ballroom dancing with each other. That's how, because you're trying to find ways to establish chemistry and connection. And so we went to several ballroom dance classes with each other, and actually our dancing then ended up getting into the show. But you're stepping on each other's toes, you're getting comfortable with being in physical proximity of each other. That all helped as well with the chemistry. And then the boys, Evan and Jahi, reading Einstein on the page was like, where are we gonna find this quirky? And that's based on Paul and his brother, by the way. And Evan came in, and I went, yep, there's the pole vaulter. Yeah. There he is. And it just felt incredibly natural.
I've read that when you've done a lot of historical films, projects, and I heard you say for Selma you had them tighten your collar.
Oh yeah.
so you could, But what do you do in a role like this? What do you do to add to that physicality of a performance like this that is very fun and fantastical?
For Hampton, it was music. I always had music in my head every time he was moving. So his walk, everything about him, he's got a soundtrack to his own life. And that was partly inspired by Paul, who would constantly have music playing on the set. Paul's a real music guy. He thinks in those terms, in terms of shooting. Before every take, he would just play a blast of music. So there's a kind of a rhythm and a music in the show. And I just ran with that because obviously in playing a version of Paul's dad, I was really looking to him for pointers as to how do I get into this world in a way that feels right for him. And if he is so consumed by the musicality of it, I'm going to let that be something that informs how this guy moves. So down to the boots I wear, there were other shoes that they wanted me to wear that I just felt like I can't move like Hampton in this. He needs to be light on his feet. So that's why we ended up with these Beetle boots. And then we ended up with these, his pants needed to be a little bit higher up, just so that if he were to do a spin or a twist or whatever, you're just like, ooh, and Paul also had this thing about the color blue being hope and aspiration. So that's why he has that blue suit that he ends up with, and that's why you have so much sky in the show as well, because we think it's radical, political, beautiful, joyous to have a black family constantly pointed towards hope, despite the challenges that they're facing. And so many of the elements that were added were intentional from that point of view.
And I love the other son and his admiration of Native American indigenous culture.
Yeah.
But where did it come from?
That was Paul.
Oh,
He was obsessed with that when he was a kid. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Before we wrap up, as you've spoken, this series is about dreamers. So what about Hampton has taught you about how you approach your own dreams?
Well, what I love about him is he's incredibly tenacious. And I will say that is something that I share. The things that I have been a part of that I valued the most have tended to take a fair bit of time to get across the line. Actually, Government Cheese is one of the ones that took less time than the others. This took 6 years, but Bass Reeves was like 10 years, and that's about 7 years, 8 years tends to be the average. But he's just indefatigable. He is just going to keep on going no matter what. And I love the fact that there's a kind of a twinkle with that. I do that, but for me, it's like, let me go and boss the day. I sort of treat getting projects up the hill as going to war, in a sense. There's something a bit lighter about Hampton, and that was something I really loved being around for 6 months of shooting it. People associate me with more dramatic roles, more dramatic stories. But, my wife and I have 4 kids, and our family is super quirky. You want to know how quirky your family is? Go to a restaurant and start seeing how people are reacting to you. That's how I'm like, oh, I think we're weird. I just, there are so many things about the Chambers family that I identified with. But him somehow, this constant optimism with him is something that I really just enjoyed being in the skin of. One of the last things is I'm just so proud that we got to shoot it in California. California is really struggling at the moment with not much production between COVID and the strikes and the fires recently. We have lost so much production, and people are moving not just away from LA and California, but out of the industry entirely because they cannot make a living. Selfishly for me, I insisted on shooting in LA because I had just done Bass Reeves for 6 months in Texas. I have a young family. 2 of my kids are out of the house, but my younger 2 are, I know. But my other 2 are still in the house. And I was like, guys, if I'm going to do a series with you, I have got to be home. And they went with me on that. But what I couldn't have expected is almost every day a crew member coming up to me and just saying, thank you so much for this being shot here. I can't remember the last time I was able to work and see my family, sleep in my own bed, and for 6 months at a go in the town that is supposed to be the hub of our industry. So, that's just something I'm deeply proud of.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bless you. Thanks for coming out.